It's time for ROTD Weekend. Our grandmothers and our mothers are smart, and we should pay attention to what they're doing. I had a lesson in this recently thinking about my grandmother. So this is my dad's mom. You usually hear me talk about my mom's mom, my Ukrainian baba, but this is my dad's mom. And I guess a little bit about my mom. So whenever we make pumpkin pie, me and my mom, she always says that she likes having the leftover evaporated milk in the can that she can then use to put in her coffee, and that really tastes really good. And it always makes me think of how evaporated milk in coffee, or actually in tea, makes me think of my grandmother. Because when we would go to my grandma's house, there would always be tea, and it would always have a little pitcher of evaporated milk on the side, because my grandmother had evaporated milk instead of like a pitcher of fresh milk. She used the canned milk. So that flavor always reminds me of tea at my grandma's. And recently I've realized that I've been having that memory from that flavor more often recently, and it's because I've been using more evaporated milk. Now, not because I've had those mac and cheese with evaporated milk recipes go viral on TikTok and Instagram, not for that reason, although that has made me talk about evaporated milk more often than I ever thought I would. But yeah, not because of that. It's because I have been finding that with my kids going back and forth to their dads every second week, my household being smaller, and in addition, my son being just busier than usual. He's going to the gym, he's out with friends. I mean, he got his driver's license, so he is out in the world. So even when my kids are here, I'm not always cooking as much, and he's not eating and drinking as much here as he was. We're using less milk, and the milk was going bad or not getting used. I realized the issue was kind of like towards the last couple days that they were here, I would buy the smallest jug, but even still it wouldn't get used, and then I don't drink very much milk. And so then by the time they come back, that milk has gone bad. And so what I've started doing is getting both cans of evaporated milk and the like Tetra packs of UHT ultra pasteurized shelf stable milk. And I keep those in my pantry. And then on those last couple of days, if I run out of the fresh milk, I can assess things. And if I think I'm going to need a little bit more, I can open one of those Tetra packs. If I don't think I'm going to need very much, if it's just for cooking, if I don't think they're going to drink any, then I open the can of evaporated milk. Like if I'm baking something or for putting into a sauce. And then I have that can of evaporated milk in the fridge. And you guessed it, it goes into my tea and reminds me of my grandma. Now, the reason that all of this has made me realize just how smart our grandmothers and our mothers are is that, well, I always knew that my grandma was very frugal, and so I thought that she was buying the canned milk out of just frugality because it's less expensive, it's a small amount, but now I totally get it. It wasn't just that. It was that she only had to open it when she needed it, and until then it was on the shelf, and so there was like almost no waste, right? You're not buying it a few days ahead, it's sitting in the fridge, none of that. You open it exactly when you need it, and then it's going to last longer, and you're probably going to get through it, less waste, less money, like just brilliant, right? And then of course my mom is smart because she's the one who taught me to put evaporated milk into my coffee as well, which is extra delicious. So when it comes to cooking for smaller households, something that you know I am fixated a lot on right now for that big project I'm working on. I'll tell you more about it soon, but I am fixated on that. And as I am realizing the various things that I've learned to do over the years, I am sometimes connecting them to people who have come before me and realizing just how smart they all are. Gosh, wouldn't it be great if young people realized that sooner? I know, I hear you. I am right there with you with my teenagers in my house. Oh, they're great. It's fine. But you know, those magic words, you were right, Mom. Those are a little bit rare, aren't they? And I'm sure my guest today would agree. I am speaking to mom of 8, Tina Frank. She is the blogger behind spaghettiandconfetti.com, a site full of old world Italian flavors with a pinch of Midwestern charm, because she is definitely Midwestern charming. I am delighted to share my conversation with you today with Tina Frank. Christina. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Christine, for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you. I so often have on guests who are food bloggers who've been blogging for a really long time, but you are a food blogger who's been blogging for a shorter amount of time, and that's exciting to me. I remember what it was like to be in the early days, but I thought we'd start with going even further back than that. What first got you excited about food and cooking, which of course eventually led to the blog, but where did that first love come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. From my childhood, I come from a big Italian family. So my grandma had like 10 brothers and sisters. My grandfather had like 16 brothers and sisters. So there was a lot of Italian cooking and family get-togethers and cousins and all the things. My husband was asking me the other day, how long have you been cooking? And I said, well, I think probably from the time my grandma could prop me up and let me help her with whatever she was doing. So probably as a toddler, I would say, I don't know. I just remember being in her kitchen with her constantly because I was with her a lot. So I think I learned from just watching her and helping her and her letting me do things. And I'm so grateful to her for that because it gave me lots of cooking experience to pass on to my own family.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. And it also, I don't know if you feel this way, having grown up in a similar Ukrainian kitchen, not an Italian kitchen, but that like feeling in your bones, like sometimes you just know how to do something. Yes. Even though you don't ever remember learning it, or like even muscle memory, like when I'm making pierogies and I'm pinching them, like my hands just know what to do. And it's because even if I do it once a year, I did it at such a young age. Do you have those kinds of memories?
Yeah, that's funny because my husband will ask me how to do certain things. And I'm like, I don't know. This is just this way my grandma did it. That's how I know how to do it. He thinks it's hilarious because I can always get meatballs the same shape without using a scoop. And I'm like, we didn't have scoops. We just used our hands, So it's like you said, I think it's that muscle memory. And even though you learned it as such a young child and maybe you don't even remember learning it, it's just that memory of doing it, the repetition, I guess, of doing it over and over. And it just kind of ingrains and beds in your memory.
I love that. Oh, and you mentioned the meatballs the same size. It's like you know the weight. Like it should just feel this way, right? I know you have older children. Mine are learning to cook this summer. People who are listening know that. I've been talking about it a lot. And there's this really funny thing that happens. I don't know if it's happened with you where, I'm literally showing my son how to chop an onion. Like I'm telling him and I'm kind of standing beside him doing it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I need to actually stand there and do it myself because I don't know exactly what I'm doing. Like I'm doing it, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I find that I'm not the best teacher sometimes. I know how to do it in my own head, but then when I try to repeat it and regurgitate it to someone else, it's a little bit more difficult for me, but I do like showing. My kids luckily have brains like mine. They're like hands-on, so they'd rather watch me do it and then do it than, me actually like give them the steps on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how our brains and how we learn differently.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You don't know this, but everybody listening knows this. My kids are learning to cook by cooking the recipes from my website. So I'm printing them off and handing them. I have to show them some basics. The chopping the onion was an example. Some basics that aren't written in the recipe, obviously, right? But it's been really interesting. I think they're doing better and learning more that way than when I was actually trying. All these years I've been like trying to teach them and it hasn't worked. That's been really fun. So you have a very large number of children.
Yes.
Do they get in? Are they cooks? Are they cooking too?
We do have several cooks in the family. Same thing that you said about going to the website to get the recipes and trying them. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do the blog was because my kids are adults now. A lot of them, almost all of them. Well, all of them are adults. One's still living at home, but they want the recipes. So I'm like, go to the website now. The recipe's there so they can go and they can find our family recipes there that way when they need them. And they've been sharing them with friends. So that's fun too, because everybody's always asking, what's the recipe? Well, now you can go get it. So,
yeah. So your site is spaghettiandconfetti.com?
That's correct.
Tell me how that name happened.
When you're trying to find a name, it's sometimes you're just like, what is it? I like the spaghetti because obviously I'm Italian and my family background that I wanted to include that because that's what the whole blog is about, Italian American recipes. But I'm super outgoing and boisterous and can be loud because I'm Italian. And I just thought confetti, the pop of confetti and excitement that kind of comes and the joy that comes with confetti. I just wanted that to be included somehow. And the two words just kind of went together perfectly. So
yeah. Oh, I love it.
About.
That's great. So your Blog is mostly Italian recipes. It's Italian American. So I don't want to say modernizing. American is not more modern than Italian, but are you Americanizing them to like what we have at our grocery stores, or are you more cooking those things that we think of as Italian in the States, but aren't even necessarily Italian? Or is it a little both? What does that mean to you, Italian American?
It's kind of a little of both, I think. A lot of these are family recipes that were made by my grandma that have been passed down from her parents to her. But some of them are ones that I came up with along the way that, like, my grandma never made fettuccine Alfredo, but I have a great fettuccine Alfredo recipe, which some people would debate whether that's, Italian or Italian American or the way it's made. I probably make it more like a comfort food American style than actually true, authentic Italian recipe would say. So mine is kind of like Italian comfort food and very family friendly. I try to make it as kid friendly as possible because I had a lot of picky eaters in my house growing up. And I always told the kids, I'm not running a diner. So I tried to make things that everyone, pretty much liked and that weren't like weird. The kids, not kid friendly, basically. You know how it is that they see any green, then they're not eating it. So you got to like hide it. But yeah, so it's kind of a mixture, I would say. I'm using a lot of recipes that my grandma used, but I also found that she was born in the States. Her parents were not, obviously, but she was born in the States. And I think that they adapted a lot to the American culture when they came here and used a lot of ingredients and products they had here that they wouldn't have had there. So I think that it's kind of their adaptation of it.
Yeah. So your great grandparents had already figured out what things at the market stores were comparable. They'd already made those swaps before your grandmother started making them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So you mentioned fettuccine Alfredo, and I know that this is controversial in like so many ways. Do you first have thoughts on the differences between an Italian version and an American comfort food version? What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't done like a ton of research on it, but just, coming across things online. The version I make has heavy cream and Parmesan and butter. So I feel like it's like an Italian macaroni and cheese with fettuccine noodles, to be honest. But like, I know that the authentic version is no cream, I don't think at all, right? Like,
I think that's true. Yeah, I think it's just the butter and the cheese. I don't even think it has garlic in it, which I just, what? Alfredo sauce without garlic. But yeah, it's like they're completely different dishes, right?
Yeah. And my grandmother never made it. Well, she always made her version of fettuccine. She would use fettuccine noodles, but she would use ricotta cheese somehow. I don't even remember how she processed it. And then she would put peas with it.
Oh.
But she always would call this fettuccine, but I think she was referring to the noodles.
Yeah.
I mean, she would never say Alfredo. But I always thought that was interesting. She never wrote anything down. She didn't make that often, so I don't have that particular recipe. But I always thought it was interesting because when I grew up and made this recipe, I was like, this is nothing like what my grandmother made. But again, I think she was referencing the noodles and not so much the sauce part of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So they're both fettuccine dishes, but the sauce, the ricotta and peas, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That's like a classic combination, right? I think.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to recreate that one.
I know you haven't recreated it yet, but now I'm curious. Did it have the like texture of the ricotta, or did it get smoothed out into like a wetness, like into a sauce?
It was more like a textured sauce, to be honest with you. It wasn't creamy like a creamy, silky Alfredo sauce. It kind of was like clumpy and like it had almost like that cottage cheesy type texture, but obviously it's different. But
yeah. Oh, that sounds really good. Now I'm super intrigued.
I got to write this down so I can recreate it.
I learned to make homemade ricotta cheese, maybe a year ago. And I'm obsessed with it now. And I can't make it very often because when I make it, every time I'm in the fridge, I'm eating it with like a big tablespoon. So I don't make it often. But when I hear about a recipe like that, it makes me think, okay, I need to make another batch. And when I do, it needs to be used in something amazing like that one. Yeah. It sounds so good. Okay. So Tina, have you brought a recipe to tell me about today?
I have. The recipe I want to talk about is actually my Nona's Italian meatballs recipe, which is not a super unique recipe, but it's probably my favorite recipe that I have of hers.
Actually, this is fascinating to me. Meatballs is one of those things that we think that they're the same, but everybody does them different in like a whole bunch of tiny little ways. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to pre-guess which ways yours are, but it's like, I always love when I'm at somebody's house over the holidays or something and they're doing a roast dinner and they're making gravy. I love watching people make gravy because the end result's always delicious and they taste fairly similar, but they do them completely differently, you know?
Yeah.
Super fun. Okay, meatballs. Where do you start with your grandmother's meatballs?
So my grandma's recipe was to start with 32 ounces of ground beef chuck. She used ground beef chuck. I think she probably used that because it was less expensive. My grandma didn't have a lot of money. My grandfather passed away when I was like in the third grade, and my grandmother lived till she was 96. So she was on her own for quite some time.
Yeah.
But so she was a penny pincher. So she used ground chuck, which I find still works great. And then she used also another 16 ounces of ground pork. So always the mixture there of the beef and the pork. The type of beef I don't think matters so much. I think it's that combination that makes it so yummy, the pork and the beef together.
Yeah, that makes sense. You get the extra fat and that the ground pork flavor is so good.
Yeah, I know. I love it. The one thing she always used to say was she never wanted to season pork. Now, I don't know if it was because she just didn't want the additional seasoning. She wanted to season it on her own, but she was always like adamant about it not being seasoned.
I wonder if, so you can buy the like pork sausage meat at the grocery store, which is like Italian sausage not put in casings. But quite often the pork is like a breakfast pork sausage seasoning, right? Like sage, like sometimes even like some cinnamon in there. Like I could totally see like her at one point buying it one time and then being like, this cannot go in my meatballs.
Yeah, it would change the flavor profile. Not to say that it would be gross, but it would change it a lot.
Yeah. It'd be great for like breakfast meatballs. I mean, I could get behind that.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds like a great recipe, some breakfast meatballs.
Yeah, in like a sausage gravy kind of thing on biscuits.
Yeah.
I'm making notes.
Right.
New ideas.
All kinds of recipe ideas today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the beef and the pork not seasoned. What is next?
Then we're going on to Parmesan cheese and Italian breadcrumbs. She most often made breadcrumbs herself. She was always a saver of all the old stale bread and letting it sit out and get stale and then making her own breadcrumbs. You can obviously do that. I actually have a recipe on the blog for Italian breadcrumbs if you're interested. But you can also just grab the Italian breadcrumbs at the store. Works perfectly fine as well.
And are Italian breadcrumbs just regular dried breadcrumbs that are seasoned?
Yes. They already have, I think, maybe some oregano and Italian seasoning in them. Most do. I think there's, obviously different varieties of them, but that's mostly what's in there.
I was mostly just making sure that there's not some new. I remember when panko breadcrumbs first came on the market, like it was a long time ago, but like this whole new style of breadcrumbs. I'm like, wait a minute, I better make sure. It's not some new thing that I don't know about. Okay, Italian seasoned breadcrumbs sounds great.
And then we move on to the binder, which is eggs. You use 3 eggs in these meatballs and then a little bit of purified water just to give it a little bit of moisture. So we have granulated garlic. You can also use fresh garlic, but my grandma always used granulated garlic probably because it was more available. We live in the Midwest, so fresh stuff was always not available to her. So she used granulated garlic, dried parsley flakes, Italian seasoning, kosher salt, and black pepper. So the rest of the ingredients are really pretty just simple. I think that's why I love this recipe because it's simple. And I think sometimes people get intimidated by thinking, oh, I'm going to make meatballs, but they're really, really easy. And I think they're great because you can make them ahead and stick them in your freezer. And then on a weeknight, you can throw them out. And it's such a quick dinner idea.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when you freeze them, do you freeze them raw or do you freeze them already cooked?
I freeze them already cooked because then it makes it so quick to reheat. And my husband and I, since now we're kind of empty nesters, so I find myself throwing meatballs in little like ramekin type things and then putting some sauce and some mozzarella cheese and putting them in the oven and then that's dinner.
Yeah. Oh, well, that sounds delicious too, right? Oh, yeah. You know what? That's actually such an interesting idea because cooked ground beef doesn't freeze great, right? Like the crumble, like if you cook it, it gets freezer burnt really quickly. It's kind of dry. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can pull it out and add some tomato sauce to it and put it on pasta, but it's not going to be amazing. Whereas if you have like meatballs cooked, they hold up better in the freezer. And then that's going to be like a treat of a dinner when you're having meatballs and sauce instead of like ground beef and sauce. I actually think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a great way to have a quick dinner, especially when you're like me and we're cooking all day and then don't want to cook our own dinner.
I know. I hear you. It's so crazy. Okay. So you just mix it all up in a bowl.
Yeah, that's the other great thing. You're throwing everything in one bowl, basically, and then just getting your hands dirty. And if you don't like getting your hands dirty, you can put gloves on. And if you really want to use like a potato masher or something like that to mix it up, or a wooden spoon, that's fine too. But I find the easiest way to get it all combined and everything blended together is just to get your hands dirty. And then obviously you have to start rolling the meatballs at some point, and they got to get dirty anyways.
It's so true. Yeah, you got to get in there for this one. Do you do anything to try to not overwork the meat? Do you worry about that with this?
I try to just make sure I'm just doing it just till it's combined and not just, kneading and kneading and kneading them.
Mm-hmm.
My grandma never really talked about that, but I never really noticed her overdoing it. So I don't find it's a big issue there.
Makes sense. Okay, so then what's next?
Then we're rolling them, obviously, all as closely as you can to getting them the same size. I usually do about 2-ounce balls.
Okay.
You can use a cookie scoop if you want and level it off and roll them that way. This recipe yields about 36 meatballs, so it's quite a bit, but it's one of those where you can stock them in the freezer and then just pull them out as you want.
Mm-hmm. Wait, is that like golf ball size? A little bit bigger?
Probably a little bigger than a golf ball.
And then these are obviously not those really huge Italian meatballs that you sometimes see. I've never understood those, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's the novelty of it all, maybe, but
bigger is better for some things, for some people. I don't know. Okay, so these are 2 ounce, just a little bit more than a golf ball. You roll them, and what do you try them into a tray or something while you're going?
Yeah, I do. I usually just use like a 13x9 baking pan, like you would do a cake in. Mm-hmm. Or if you have baking sheets that have a big lip, you can also use those. You just want to make sure, because there'll be some dripping, so you don't want to have something that's going to overflow into the oven, obviously. Mm-hmm. Just spray it down and then pop all the meatballs in there and bake them at 400. They usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but just got to make sure that if you have a meat thermometer, that's a great way to tell when they're done. Just put them in there until they beep.
So you bake them?
Yes.
You don't pan fry them?
My grandmother also pan fried them, but I find when you're doing this many, it's just as easy to put them in the oven and do them all at once, and then just pop them in and let them cool off, and then freeze them or use them right away if you want, obviously.
And do they brown in that time, or are they a little bit paler?
They do brown. One side always gets a little toastier than the other. You can go in there like halfway and kind of roll them around if you want, if you really want that browning on both sides. But I find they still have that little kind of crusty texture on one side. It's I kind of love that. There's a little bit of olive oil in them, so it makes its way to get it a little bit toasty. But they're a little pale on one side, like I said, unless you turn them over.
I've turned the broiler on them for the last few minutes before to try and get that. Sometimes it works beautifully, and other times I'm like, why are they not browning? So I don't know. Maybe sometimes the fat content, like the pork or olive oil or something, was more than others. That's probably what it is.
Probably. Yeah, and my grandmother also did them on the stove with olive oil sometimes, but usually, if she, like I said, if she was doing a big batch of this size, she would always just stick them in the oven.
I actually really love that, because I always think that I'm cheating when I bake meatballs. But if your Italian grandmother did it, then we all are allowed to bake meatballs.
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
Love it.
Permission.
We have permission. Okay, so then they're cooked. You're going to freeze some of them. If you were going to have them for dinner right then, would you mix them with sauce?
Yeah, like I said, you can use them right away, right with your traditional spaghetti and meatballs, or with whatever other yummy pasta dish you're making. Or you can eat them alone. Like I said, pouring some sauce on them and putting the mozzarella on them, and especially getting that last few minutes under the broiler with the mozzarella over them. Oh my gosh. We eat those once a week, I swear.
Oh no, I'm sure. And you know what? Has this always been a thing? I feel like these days, 1 out of 3 nice restaurants that I go to, like maybe it's a Florida thing, but we go to, meatballs are on the appetizer menu, and that's how they come. You get like 2 or 3 of them, maybe with some cheese, some sauce. And I don't even think they put bread with them, but it's become kind of not the spaghetti and meatballs entree. It's become an appetizer just like that. And they're delicious.
Yeah. I've heard that, just watching different shows about Italy, that they don't do spaghetti and meatballs there, that's not really a thing. So, but I don't know. Like I said, it's another thing to research on ChatGPT, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would make sense, right? So maybe what I'm seeing on these menus, my daughter loves meatballs, so we order them every time. It's
Yeah.
because it is kind of a traditional Italian meatball as opposed to the spaghetti and meatballs. Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, Tina, these sound delicious. Thank you so much for telling me about them. Can you let everybody know where they can find you online? I will link to this recipe in the show notes for everyone, but if they want to go see more, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find all of my recipes on www.spaghettiandconfetti.com. And then I'm on Instagram as Spaghetti and Confetti Blog, and then TikTok as Spaghetti and Confetti, and Pinterest, same.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Christine. Have a great day.
You too. That conversation reminded me about the Alfredo sauce controversy. I have a recipe on Facebook right now. It's in the Reels section. It's actually from a little while ago, but I think it got shown to a few people who had to make a fuss, and now people are defending me or also saying I'm crazy. This is for the easiest Alfredo sauce, the one with cream cheese in it. It is delicious, but wow, does it make people angry? So yeah, that conversation with Tina reminded me of that and reminded me how much I like meatballs. I literally have put them on my meal plan for this week to make a big batch, some for that day and some for the freezer. So thank you for that recipe, Tina. Everybody go and follow Tina. Check out her site, spaghettiandconfetti.com, and find her on Instagram, Spaghetti and Confetti Blog. And then what am I doing for my own blog this week? We are cooking up a storm. Jen is coming over. We are doing some steak bowls, Tex-Mex style, which, you know, if you've been listening, I make for my family all the time, but I just haven't yet taken the pictures. So, you know, I feel like I've said that to you before, that I hadn't taken them and I was going to, and then I didn't. And now I'm doing it again. So those pictures are being taken. I'm also finishing off the testing of a pork stew recipe. I am testing the optimum amount of marinade time for a chicken thigh marinade and for a Mexican chicken marinade. Both of those I have got a really good flavor on, and the chicken tastes really good, but I want to test different timing amounts to see what is the best time. Those ones, like a lot of my marinades, have a lot of salt in them, so they kind of act like a brine as well as like a marinade, and so going too long can really change the texture of the meat, and not enough makes it not as good. So I have to figure out the amount of times for those, so that's going to be a good round of testing there. And I am doing some baked lemon garlic shrimp. I want a really easy shrimp recipe that I'm just like putting things in a pan into the oven and walking away while I do a couple of last minute things for dinner. As to what's going live on the websites, well, yesterday on the podcast, I told you about that spinach salad dressing with the warm bacon dressing. That is the recipe sponsored by Coleman All Natural Meats, and it uses the steak cut bacon, that thick 3/8 of an inch cut, which is so amazing. You can cut it into like 1/2 inch pieces and fry them up, and they get really nice and crispy on the outside, like delicious, perfect crispy bacon, but they're still meaty in the middle. I love them on salads. So great. So that salad recipe went live on the site last week, but the podcast episode was yesterday. And also last week, the Brussels sprout salad went live on the website. That one also has those Coleman steak cut bacon. It actually uses the warm bacon dressing that is classic on that spinach salad, but instead it's on a Brussels sprout slaw. So you mix the dressing right in. It's so good. The toppings on top, the egg, the bacon, tomatoes, red onion, mushrooms, and the bacon lardon from that steak cut bacon. Amazing. So those two recipes went live last week, and I told you about the spinach salad on the podcast yesterday, and tomorrow I am telling you about the Brussels sprout salad on this podcast. So definitely come and check that out. And then going live on Cook the Story this week, we have the air fryer fish without breading. That is just some something that people have been asking me for. They want a quick air fryer fish recipe that does not have bread. I don't know if it's because they're keto, low carb, gluten free, or if they just want that no fuss, it goes straight in there kind of fish that you could use in a whole bunch of different things. So I've done that recipe. It's going live on Cook the Story on Monday. And then the chicken thigh marinade that I was just telling you about, I was telling you about how I want to perfect the timing on it. That recipe is done and photographed and delicious. That is going live on Monday. And then once I have the results of this timing test, I will be going back in to add those. But if you want that recipe, I know you do. It's one of these ones that you puree the ingredients into the marinade. And so it's just an extra delicious flavor bomb slurry of delicious. That is going live on the site on Monday. What I'm talking to you about on this podcast this week, I already told you the Brussels sprout salad is tomorrow. That has the warm bacon dressing that just kind of wilts the Brussels sprouts ever so slightly to soften them. It's really, really amazing. So that episode is tomorrow. And then you guessed it, the air fryer fish without breading is going up. Oh, I've got a really nice salmon recipe for you. The chicken thigh marinade is going to be on a podcast episode this week. And, a frozen chicken recipe. This is chicken parmesan, where you start with a frozen chicken breast. Just makes dinner so much easier if you forgot to take the chicken out or just can't be bothered to thaw it. You've got delicious dinner in less time. I will be telling you about that this week as well. I want to say a big thank you to Coleman All Natural Meats for sponsoring the spinach salad recipe and the Brussels sprout salad recipe that went live this past week on Cook the Story. I loved working with that steak cut bacon, and I cannot wait for you to give it a try. And I want to say a big thank you to Tina Frank for being an amazing guest. Go and check her out, spaghettiandconfetti.com. And thank you so much for listening. I'll say, if you have realized that your grandmother or mother was doing something brilliant all along and it had been passing you by just how smart they were, send me an email and tell me about it. I want to hear. You can email me at cookthestory@gmail.com and put the subject line grandmothers, and I will read it. I can't wait to hear what you've learned from them. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, recipe of the day. I hope you have a great weekend. Let's get cooking.